Hey everybody. Hi. Live again. I thought I'd just go live. I've had a super busy week and I wanted to talk to you guys about some things. I hope you're all doing well. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about cults and brain abusive boyfriends or girlfriends and brainwashing. And a lot of you had asked me about my personal experience since I've actually been in a kind of cult twice. Um, I'm just looking at, who's here. Like, I'm still a little bit new to this. I really do need to get the streaming software. But the thing is, I have a laptop. So it's like the last time I got it. Oh, hi, Lincoln. Last time I got it. Hi, Karen Burns. Nice to see you. Yeah, I got the streaming software before and it just destroyed my computer. So I'm going to tell you guys. Okay, so I just wanted to have like a little chat with you. But whatever I'm going to tell you here, I want you to. Hi, Vicky. Hi, Nikki. Whatever I tell you here, I want you to keep in mind, obviously, that you can apply it to other things. So it's a case of, if the shoe fits, wear it. I'm going to put some lipstick on first so I look pretty while I tell you, so you don't get traumatized by old pale face here. I love this. Is from Sephora. But anyway, hi, Vincent. So yes, I have been in a cult twice. Okay. And what I want to talk to you about, like I said, I don't have the software streaming, so one of the references here is a Twitter post from Kulvinder Kaur, which is entitled "You may be in an abusive relationship if they." So I want to go through this diagram. You can look this one up yourself. I guess I could just give you the link here and put it in the chat and see if that works. And let's go through that list. Sorry. There you go. Okay. And we'll see if any of this stuff. Oh my gosh, you guys, I've been like quiet all day. I haven't talked. Now I have a total frog in my throat. So sorry. So look at the graphic. We'll go through that list. And also, there's some information here from, believe it or not, Britannica, Financial Times, different places where they talked a little bit about techniques that cults use. So there's the abusive boyfriend or girlfriend, the abusive relationship issue, which is in a lot of ways pretty similar to what cults do. I mean, there's so much overlap. Plus, like I said, you can think for yourself and connect the dots whether you feel that this applies to anything else in your life. So maybe I'll tell you a little bit about my experience. So I was in what's called an experimental school. Paris Hilton had actually done an interview. I forgot with which outlet, but she had detailed her experience in a very similar experimental school. So if you want to get like a lot of information about it, one way you could easily do that is just go watch the interview with Paris Hilton. So the school that I was in was a different one, but in a lot of ways it was very similar to that. The one that I went to was called the DeSisto School at Stockbridge, which was run by Michael DeSisto, who was rather a maniac. And there is some information out there. You may remember, what was his name? Paul. Oh no, what was his name? He was like a politician. Oh, I can't remember his last name now. He had been in a relationship with like a 17-year-old student while working at this school, and or maybe the student was 18. He had a weird last name. It started with a B, and it was like actually a French name that was sort of bastardized. Maybe some of you guys remember. Hi, Hélène, and hi, Marie. I can't remember how to say his name, but anyhow, this is what brought DeSisto School sort of into the limelight in the media a few years ago. That it came out that there was a lot of abuse at this school, like, and including, well, I'm not sure what I'm allowed to say here on the live or not, but including like sexual abuse. The director was actually gay, but he was married to a woman, what they call a beard, and he actually liked boys. And so there were a number of students that were his favorites, which we called Michael's puppies, which we would actually see through the glass of his living room. There was a sort of circular area, and they'd all be lounging there. I mean, this is extremely suspicious, but when we were there, we were so young and innocent, we didn't even connect the dots. Like, what's going on with Michael's puppies? And he would give them a lot of gifts and stuff. We called them Michael's puppies, but we didn't really connect everything. And whenever allegations did come out of abuse, they didn't go anywhere because he had paid off the police department. So if people went there, they just send them back. If the students ran away, they would just send them back to the school. So stuff went on there. There wasn't a whole lot you could do about it. Now, on the sexual end, like the worst end of it, probably that didn't happen that much. I mean, I do know like there were some sexual assaults, but on the whole, in general, this is supposed to be a school, right? An experimental school. So it's a place where people are sending their kids that they're having some kind of problem with. And it could have been that the kids had behavioral problems, like, they'd been stealing cars or something serious. It could also be some of them were autistic, or they had ADHD, and there was just a handful, or the parents didn't know what to do. And in those days, nobody was diagnosed with anything. So you didn't have a label. You didn't have a diagnostic label, but you still had a lot of labels. And your parents would say, I don't know what to do with this kid. And they try to put them somewhere to help them. And some of us ended up in these experimental schools. Sometimes also the parents were getting divorced and they just really didn't want to deal with their kids. And, I think there might have been some of these in Canada. Vicky says a school in Alfred, Ontario. I don't know about that one, but I know that what was going on in the 80s in the US, 70s and 80s, even though these schools did stay operational for many years, it was very deregulated. So, in fact, Michael DeSisto was even on Oprah once talking about this. He was in, I think it was even Time magazine. There was a spread of him, and it said something about, helping troubled youth. And it was literally a picture of Michael DeSisto with his shirt off, so surrounded by all these young boys with their long flowing hair. I mean, these days that would never fly. But at the time, like I say, it was deregulated. So once the kids were in this school, the school could do just about anything with them. It was like we had no human rights. And so what ended up happening was, as you see from Paris Hilton's interview, they used all the techniques that abusive relationships do and also that cults do. I mean, it pretty much occurred to me after a while, and especially after I'd left, that this wasn't any kind of normal school. I mean, first of all, I don't like to call it a boarding school because it was year round. So I call it a residential school, but obviously not an Indian residential school. It wasn't exactly a reform school. I mean, kind of in a way, but there was more to it than that. These old style reform schools, it was hard discipline and people were there because they had criminal charges and stuff like that. Okay, so the training school in Canada, that was a reform school. Well, this was at another level. These ones were openly experimental. And they were using experimental psychiatric techniques on the kids. And this was all in the open. So this wasn't about, this wasn't like juvie. This was at a really another level. And it had a lot of the hallmarks of a cult. First of all, what you need with a cult is you need a charismatic leader. Cults just don't happen if you've got a kind of wishy-washy, lukewarm personality running it. The charismatic leader is really central to that. And one of the things that the charismatic leader creates is a doctrine of salvation of some kind. So the idea is that, in this case, if your child isn't there, they're going to die. You need the school. I'm going to call it a cult. You need this cult or you're going to die. You're going to lose your salvation or something terrible is going to happen to you. Now, I was in another one, which was also, it's considered a cult. It was called the University Bible Fellowship. And I got involved going there for Bible study. I actually didn't have such a bad experience with the place. I'm laughing because they were all about arranged marriages. And I was just kind of thinking, well, I'm getting kind of old here. I don't really mind if you just hook me up with somebody, I'll be happy. So I was like, yeah, it seems a bit cultish, but like, whatever, I'll just marry somebody and then they'll be stuck with me. And I'll do my best, but they never did marry me to anybody because I was not a very good cult member. So they had different ways of doing things. It's that place, the UBF, University Bible Fellowship, it's considered a cult if you look it up. Uh, and so they did have a lot of the same techniques, but like I say, I just wasn't a very good cult member, so I wasn't very obedient. But so what you need at the cult is a charismatic leader, and there has to be this doctrine that if you don't do what we say, you won't make it or you will die. And if you go and look at Kulvinder Kaur here, this you may be in an abusive relationship if they, and you look at some of these things that they do, those are the same things that you're going to experience. Like if you're in a cult, a lot of them are very, very similar. And in an abusive relationship, also your abusive partner will often put it in your head that if you leave me, you will be alone. Nobody will have you, right? You know, that's pretty typical. You'll never make it on your own. Maybe it could be even blackmail, like I'll take the kids or whatever. But that's pretty standard. So, like, you can apply that to some other things. Possibly, have you been in a situation where you're basically told, if you don't do what I tell you, you're going to die or you're not going to make it? You know, it doesn't have to be just a cult or a boyfriend. It could be something else. So basically, you know, you have to do whatever we say. So Michael had this kind of doctrine that what he did was he indoctrinated the parents. So he told them, if you don't leave your child here, and if they don't do what they say, and they said the same thing to the kids, then they're not going to make it and they're going to die. You know, like your child's salvation depends on being here. I mean, the same thing that happened with Paris Hilton and her school. Vape break. I feel kind of bad I didn't ask you guys how you guys are all doing. If you want to give me updates, like feel free in the chat. I hope you're all doing well. So another thing is love bombing. So this is something that your abusive partner will do. Usually you're tired. Yeah, Vicky, I've been tired today too. And actually that's why you did watch it, Ruth. Okay, cool. I was tired today too. You know, honestly, I mean, I'm sure you can understand like this whole situation. It just saps my energy sometimes, you know? And I really didn't feel like sitting here just recording this, talking to a camera by myself. I thought I'd much rather be talking to you guys. I love you guys. I think you're all super amazing. You guys are fun. You're supportive. I mean, you guys are just great. A lot of you have been here with me for a long time. So I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to go live. And I'll tell you all about this. And I kind of want to do it in an organized fashion, but at the same time, like if you have questions, go ahead and ask me. So I guess I'm backtracking a little bit about the Paris video. Yeah, so she was literally kidnapped in the middle of the night. I personally wasn't kidnapped. My parents, you know, what happened was, you guys know I'm on the autism spectrum. So back in those days, lots of corporate cults too. Interesting. Yeah, I bet that's a thing too, right? So back in those days in the 80s, you know, people like me, there was no room for us on the autism. Like you didn't get diagnosed with autism unless you were really visibly, I think, developmentally delayed and you had a really severe speech problem. All I have is circumstantial speech, which is why like my speech is sort of, there's too much detail. But anyway, like at the time, that kind of thing, it didn't count. So my parents were trying to figure out, and I had an eating disorder. So it was recommended to them to send me to an eating disorder ward of a local hospital. Like they had a teenage eating disorder ward, and my parents didn't want to send me to that hospital. And it was supposed to be like for a month. They didn't want to send me there because they said, we don't want the stigma. I wish they had been okay with the stigma. It would have been better than what ended up happening. I lost like over 3 years of my life, you know. Well, not lost completely, but it's a bit like being in jail. You come out and it's like when you come out of an institution, you feel like you're still back in the time when you left. It's like the time is just gone. And people around you that you've known, they've moved on with their lives, and like all this stuff has happened with them in the last few years. And you're just like disappeared, and then you just reinsert, and it's a bad fit because people have changed and moved on. So I think I'm just looking at your comments a little bit. Ah, okay, bye, Joel. Joel's heard it all before anyway. Um, so yeah, like if you go to jail for 10 years and you come out, I mean, you're in a different world. Everyone that you know is had a totally different experience because what jail or an institution or a cult or an experimental school, it's not society. It's a totally different world. So you're in there for like for I was there 3 years and it's like pretty much the same thing every day, day in day out, year after year. We had some summer trips, but in general, like your life is pretty much the same, and your mindset is completely different because you're being programmed all the time with this way of thinking, and you're trying to conform to it so you won't get in trouble. And I mean, that's totally not a normal experience. So obviously, when you come out of there, if you put a teenager in a place like that, they don't grow the way teenagers normally do and develop in their teenage years. I mean, they're going to develop somewhat in some way, but they're going to be missing a lot of life experiences because they're in this little place. It's not good. Anyway, I came out, and it was very strange experience. I'm glad that I split. I actually ran away. I was already 19, because you could even get stuck there past 18. They didn't care. If you were 18, if you tried to leave, they wouldn't let you, and they would actually just take underage students to run after you and tackle you and bring you back. And if you resisted, they would charge you with assaulting a minor. So, and then of course the police department was bought off. So you'd have to sneak away pretty carefully. So I managed to do that. Like I managed to walk to the village, hitch a ride at the gas station to the town. I happen to have some money on me, enough to get a bus ticket to Montreal. And at the time, I had my Medicare card, which I wasn't supposed to have, but I kept it. I snuck it um, from when I had a furlough, like a few days vacation. And I got over the border and I came back to Montreal. And I was on that bus. I had $2.65 when I came back to Montreal, and I was sitting next to these Haitian guys, and I told them my story, and I was like, I have no money, I have nowhere to go. I just ran away from this place. And they were super cool with me, and they let me stay with them. And the guy, Jean Milou, he drove me downtown to help me look for a job. And he was really nice. And, they made a big difference in my life. So I'll never forget Jean Milou. I forgot his cousin's name, but that's how I came back to Montreal. I got set up. I got a job, $5 an hour. I worked like 10 hours a week for 3 days. I had $150, and then I was back, having some money and being able to do something. I stayed with a friend. But my parents didn't know what to do with me in my teens. So they were advised to put me in this eating disorder wing of um, this hospital up here. And they didn't want to do it. So they took me down to Cambridge, Massachusetts, where they did a whole bunch of tests on me. And they were like, well, we don't really know what's wrong with her, but we suggest a residential school, a therapeutic residential school. So my parents were like, okay. And they showed us brochures from two schools. One of them was called Elan. Very lucky I didn't go there. That place was an absolute nightmare. You wouldn't believe the stuff they did to people there. They would take kids that had misbehaved and put them in a dumpster and have other kids guarding them. Like, you can make people do crazy things. That was only, one of the things. If you ran away, they like put you in a bunny suit, put shackles on you. And I'm not kidding. Like, you can look up Elan School. I think there's even some videos on YouTube. So the one that I chose it because there were horses in the brochure. But when we got there were no horses, as we all found out. So that's how I got there, and I willingly like packed my trunk and went down there. Um, is this a Christian channel? Yeah, I'm a Christian, so it's not something else, I guess. I don't talk a lot about my faith here, a little bit here and there, but yeah. So I packed up my trunk and got in the car and went down to Stockbridge, Massachusetts. And they did the interview in this big house that they call the mansion, in this beautiful room, all nice and fixed up. And the girl who did the interview with me, well, there was Michael DeSisto himself, the big cheese, and a girl called Connie who was really beautiful. And, I looked up to her right away. She was telling me how great the school had been for her, gave me the tour, told me about, her life before and stuff, what had happened. So I was like, okay. And I was honestly just so happy to be away from my parents, because I just didn't get along with my mom at all at that point, because she was trying to be very controlling, and like that kind of approach didn't work for me. And so there was a lot of, it was a lot of, when are you going to be normal? When are you going to be like other girls? And, I was autistic, sorry. So obviously, an autistic person cannot answer when they're going to be normal. It's like, I don't know what you're talking about. What do you want me to be? Like, I'm just this way, right? But we didn't have a name for it at the time. So it was just like, I was just a bad girl. So, I was happy to be away. And then, then when I got there, then I started getting the cult experience. Emily, what we're talking about was cults and abusive relationships and what they do to control you. So I'm just giving you a bit of the background of the cult-like school that I was in, which I said it's a lot like what Paris Hilton went to. But I also was in another religious group that apparently was a cult. So the fear is one thing. You're going to die if you don't do what we say. Does that sound familiar? Like, have you been in a situation where someone has told you that if you don't do everything they say, you're not going to make it? Maybe you're going to die. Okay, another thing was love bombing. Once I got there, I noticed that everybody was hugging everybody, like hanging on each other. And that, like, the tons and tons of hugs, that's a kind of love bombing. Now, when I was at the UBF, I don't remember seeing any love bombing. Maybe UBF is just a borderline cult, but with the Sisto, definitely there was a ton of love bombing. And so if we're talking about abusive relationships at the same time, this is something, when you get into the relationship, it's like you get in a relationship and it seems like it's too good to be true. Like, this guy is so into me and he is so nice and he takes me out and he buys me all this stuff. And it's like, it's all great. And, usually when people first get together, it is all pretty much wine and roses. But it's like even more, a lot of gifts and stuff. I guess after my experience, I was always very suspicious if I got involved with a guy and he was just too nice, giving me stuff. Made me very uncomfortable. But that is something that they do also, like including pimps. Oh, I had an experience also when I was younger where somebody tried to pimp me out, but I mean, I didn't think I was going to get into that here. He tried, it didn't happen. But I mean, if I think about him also, very solicitous at the beginning. I don't remember if he gave me gifts, but it was a lot of attention, a lot of positivity. So, whoever wants to manipulate you, believe me, when it starts out, it's going to be nice. They're going to be as nice as possible. They're going to just make you think that you need them. Either you're going to be alone if you're not with them, or you're going to die without them, or you're going to die if you don't do what they say, or you're just not going to make it. You're going to be poor or whatever. Some kind of bad, like, something is not going to go well if you just don't cooperate. But it's not done in like, when you meet the abusive boyfriend or you get involved with the cult or whatever else it is, right? It doesn't start out in a way that makes you suspicious, unless you're like me and you have experience and your spider senses go up. It always starts out like, wow, this is so great. And this is the same thing that happens when people get scammed too. How many stories have you seen where someone is like, oh, and I met this guy and he was so great and I thought I was in love and we got married and then he took all my money, or sometimes worse. But yeah, they start out super nice. There's a lot of love bombing, and cults will do that. Like, if you go and see what cults are doing, they're a lot of positive affirmations, positivity, making you feel included. You feel like, oh, somewhere I belong and they love me here. And they'll tell you, we love you. I'm looking at your comments too. So, like, love bombing can be in different forms. I mean, I remember, a couple of years ago when certain people were getting parades, like, for example, Like if you want to show appreciation for certain people in society, so you like make a big show of like doing parades for them, for example. It could be parades, it could be gifts, it could be just saying how much the person is valued, how much they're valued. I guess you guys know what I'm talking about, right? Do you remember being in an experience where you felt like there was love bombing going on? And it can because in a broader context, it's not limited only to cults and abusive relationships. It can also be abusive societies, abusive regimes or whatever, right? And they'll use social media also. So this is telling you, like, if you're doing this, you get love bombed. Everybody loves you. This is what you got to do. Look, you're a hero now. You're a great, important cult member. You have a lot of status in the church, the cult, or whatever. And on a more personal relationship with the boyfriend, it's like, you're great. I love you so much. You're the best. I'm going to give you all this stuff. Flowers, whatever. But the next step is to create a dependence. So if I'm looking at what happened when I was in the school, I mean, clearly we were dependent. I mean, we couldn't leave. And we were really told, like, you have to do all this or, it's not going to go well. But also in the day-to-day, you pretty much had to do exactly what you were being told. And let me tell you, Michael was very, idiosyncratic. He came up with ideas that it wasn't any kind of proven therapy. You just decided, now we're going to do this, now we're going to do that. But you had to do these things or you lose privileges. That's another thing that factors into all this. But like for, let's say, your average cult, a lot of times they expect you to give all your money or you have to move in. In an abusive relationship, if you move in or you let them move in with you, you're in big trouble. It's very hard to get out, right? If you move in with your abusive partner, you can become dependent because it gets complicated then. Even if they move in with you and you want to get out of the relationship, and that means one of you has to move. Now, what if they don't want to move? Well, you're going to lose your apartment, It's complicated. So this dependence is another factor. In society, dependence could come in the form of a sort of rewards or relief also. That you take it and you're saying, thanks for all your nice comments. You take it and you're thinking, this is going to help me, right? But I mean, like, and I'm trying not to go on too many tangents here, but let's say, for example, our welfare program, which some people absolutely need, it's designed to keep you dependent, as far as I can tell, because there's so many restrictions on you once you're on it. And they give you so little that, like, it makes it impossible for you. It's like they keep you in a hole and they just keep dropping crumbs in there. But it makes it very hard for you to ever get out of that hole. I'm not saying that that's a cult, but it's an approach. I want you to, in your mind, connect the dots to other things that are similar without me having to spell it out for you. Think about it. So another thing is isolation. Obviously, cults do this. When I was in Justisto, we were cut off from the outside world, and we didn't even have access to TV or really anything. I mean, we did sometimes have cassette players and radios, but because we were being subjected to group punishment, they would often take them away. So if you did something, you just lose all your stuff. But basically isolated. We were way out in the country. And we didn't have a normal amount of contact with the outside world. Like, you might get 1 5-minute phone call a week, depending on your level. So that's another thing, the levels. I feel so restricted actually talking about this on here, because I'd say more, but like there's levels. In cults, this is something they always use. Well, in the school that I was in, it was level 1, 2, 3, 4. And another interesting thing they did was that they would use other students to police the students. So that's something you do in a cult. You get the other cult members to control each other. It's not only the cult leader telling everybody, this is what you're going to do, and if you don't do that, they're doing it to each other. That's a very powerful tool. It's like it manages itself. All you have to do is manage the people at the top, and they'll manage the next level, and they'll manage the bottom. So this is what happened in the school that I was in. They had a level system. I mean, the staff that was hired actually didn't do that much, because most of this controlling was done by the other students, just like in a cult. It's just done by the members. And you couldn't go out when you wanted to. You couldn't talk to people as much as you wanted to. You could at another level, like at the basic. Okay, there was another. I guess you could call it level 0. It was called the farm. When you're in the farm, you had absolutely nothing. They would even sometimes take your clothes away. Well, they had me in a sheet at one point. I was sitting around in a sheet. They took my clothes away. They would take your shoes away. They take all your stuff away. So if you're at the farm, like, you were basically locked in, and the room was so small. I mean, I did like solitary on the farm once. The room was like smaller than a prison cell. It had space for like a bed, and there was like a cupboard on the other side. But I mean, there was like that much room between the bed and the wall. I mean, there was nothing. And they thought it was a good idea to put me in there completely by myself for 2 weeks with just a journal. Literally 2 weeks in a cell. Well, I mean, it was a room, right? It had a carpet, it had a bed, it had a dresser, but for all intents and purposes, it's a cell. I mean, I could not leave this room. So that's isolation. There's isolation from your family. You don't see them. And they check your mail. I mean, they censored our mail too. Your phone calls are maybe restricted, or maybe you're not allowed at all. Or if you're at a higher level, they might let you use a phone. I mean, when we were on the farm, no phone at all. And then there was also confinement. So there was multiple layers of confinement. Confinement is a super important technique to break people down. It messes with their heads. There's nothing therapeutic about confining people. We saw what happened to the seniors. I was just there seeing my mother yesterday. When I came in there, she was sitting in her room with her eyes closed. The lights were down. She was just in there, for a short time. And she was just tired, she was depleted. And I thought, imagine that. This is what people with Alzheimer's were living for months. They had them locked in their rooms, completely cut off. And these are people who have a disorder where, I mean, if they're not stimulated, it's just, they deteriorate very quickly. Luckily, my mother never actually had that, because she was in the hospital through most of the confinement time, and they didn't confine me in the hospital. But I looked at that, and it was just like, it hit home so much of like how they confine people. And then, of course, we were also confined in our homes. We're still confined, if we have a bad test result or whatever. So we have some experience with confinement. So you can imagine when I was in this cult, and this is another part I was going to get into, talking about the invented terminology. They could room you. So you could be dormed, which meant that, and again, another thing, group punishment. So these are things they're all working together. So you have isolation. You also have group rewards and punishment, group consequences. So you combine these two, and what happens is somebody in the group steps out of line, the entire group gets isolated. So they would confine us to the dorm, and then we had to work it out to get back out, and that could take a really long time. But what does this do to your mind? People break down. Eventually, they just kind of lose their sense of who they really are anyway. They lose their sense of boundaries. They start to just be like, yeah, okay. It starts to change their way of thinking, They don't know who they are anymore. It's teaching you not to respect your boundaries. When you're in a cult, It's teaching you not to respect your boundaries, because your boundaries are going to come up. You're going to be like, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't sound right to me. I don't think this is okay. But the cult is telling you, ignore your inner voice and do what you're told. And if you keep doing that over and over and over and over again, eventually you don't hear your inner voice. It gets smaller and smaller. So somebody steps out of line, the entire dorm is dormed. Even possible, the dorm could be lobbied, which meant we were literally confined just to the lobby. Confinement was a huge part of what they used on us. Of course, they said it's in a therapeutic context, but there's no such thing as therapeutic confinement. In prisons, they confine and they say it's a punishment. But in our school, our cult, they said it's therapeutic, to teach us responsibility. But it was a nightmare, honestly. So they confine the whole dorm. They can confine you to the lobby. Now, more than that, they could confine you to your room. Not usually the whole dorm is roomed, but they could room a person. And on top of that, they had another thing that they called shifted, which was that, see, again, they're making the other members of the society, i.e. the cult, i.e. the experimental school, police the other members. They don't have to do it all. This is a bit KGB. Society will police itself. So they would have students watch the student that was suspect. Like if they thought your thinking wasn't right, they'd say, maybe you're going to run away. So we're going to shift you, which meant that there would be two people watching you. Actually it was rotational, right? So all night you have shifts of two people at a time watching you. So you, even when you're sleeping, like someone is watching you. And what they did, which is kind of crazy, was that they would push a mattress in front of the door so that you couldn't open the door. But the way I remember it, the door opened inward and the mattress was on the inside of the room. It's been a long time, but I think it was on the inside. I know it was on the inside. And that's a fire hazard, but they didn't care. So that's what they did. And then they would have these two people up watching you. That's another thing. There's isolation, but there's also a lack of privacy, constant surveillance. These are all the things that they do to you to make you lose who you are. That's what a cult does. So when I was there, they had a thing called, and I'm going to have to tell you about the terminology because that's a part of it too. That's something cults do also. They invent their own terminology. That's part of making you like think in a different way. Like you're thinking like the cult now. You're not thinking normal society way anymore. You have cult think. The lingo is part of that. So Virginia Woolf says, seems like I turned out well. Eventually. Well, thanks to God, actually, thanks to Jesus. I think it's because I got saved. Then my life started to really turn around. But I have a video up about my drug use and my near-death experience or something. And go see that video about what happened to me when I was about 20 years old. I was kind of a destroyed person when I came out of there, to be honest. But I've been rebuilt. And I believe it's all because of the work of God. Because I should have been just completely demolished. I mean, I was, for a while. So you're being isolated from... You're being isolated. The boyfriend or the girlfriend, the abusive relationship would do the same thing. Isolated from the people who might go, hey, wait a minute, this isn't right, and I'm going to help you get out of there. So you're isolated from your family, your friends, society at large. And at the same time, you're not allowed to have any privacy. So you're being monitored all the time. So this is what they were doing to us. And then this is why I started talking about the terminology. So they had this term that was called leashed. They later changed it to friended, but it doesn't matter what they call it. You're still on a leash. So when you were leashed or friended, you had to be arm's distance from someone. So, even here, there's this prescription of the distance you have to keep from another person. So they're micromanaging you in the cult. You cannot be further than arm's length away, right? And obviously in that case, you have no privacy. But imagine somebody's telling you not just where you can go, as in you can't leave the school or you can't go to school building, but where you can be in relation to another human being. And they'll come and check, are you arm's distance? And they'll put their arm out. Oh, you're further than arm's distance. So now you're going to be handheld friended or handheld leashed. And if you're still giving us a hard time, you're going to be double handheld. So you're going to have two people on either side invading your personal space 24/7. Well, except for at night when you're probably shifted, holding your hand all the time. Do you know what that does to somebody? To be invaded to that point, to have someone, how comfortable do you feel when somebody's like just arm's distance away and they won't leave you alone, even in the bathroom, even in the shower? Is that therapeutic? Is that Larimar? Yes, I got it in Mexico. My last trip. It was worth it. It was worth it to go there and worth it to get this. I love it. But imagine what that does to your mind, that you know that if you step out of line, you could end up on a prescription to not be allowed to be further than 3 feet or, arm's distance from another person. They will follow you everywhere, even into the washroom, even watching you in the shower. Now, in case you're wondering, the dorms were generally either a girls' dorm or a boys' dorm. There were a couple that they called specialty dorms where they did extracurricular activities that you had to qualify to be in that dorm. And they were mixed, but they had a hallway for the boys and a hallway for the girls. So you would not be getting watched by a guy in the shower. But that level of monitoring, have you ever been monitored? Have you ever had someone who's monitoring you? Have you ever had, maybe apps that monitor you? How does it make you feel? Think about it. And again, with the abusive relationship parallel also, that is something that abusive partners will do. They won't let you go where you want. They will listen to your phone calls. They will read your text messages. They will look at your Facebook, or they'll just take it away. That goes back to what I just told you about your dependence and the punishment, the group punishment. They take it away. That's another thing. I mean, man, there's so many things. If you don't do what we say, if you've been bad, we will take away your privileges. That's what I lived with for 3 years. And guess what? When you're in a cult like that, everything is a privilege. Think about that. When you're living in a cult, I mean, heads up, you might not want to join one, but you can also connect the dots for other things, other relationships in your life. When somebody's telling you that what you considered was your right before, now it's a privilege because you're on our turf, because you're in our school. So, for example, our makeup was a privilege that could be taken away. Being allowed to leave the dorm was a privilege. Having more than 7 days worth of clothing was a privilege. You had an allowance, you had to earn it. You could also get charged for a million things. There was fines everywhere. Everything you did, you could get fined. You can get fined. You can get fined. So again, you're going to watch yourself because you're going to get fined. So you could, you could be doing maid service and get paid for maid service. And then your money just gets taken away because, oops, you stepped in the hallway with your shoes on. So the fines are really like arbitrary. Hi, Mandy. Sounds like an extreme cult. I was there for 3 years. Crazy Cuban, your story is my story. I think maybe a few people in my audience will relate to this at this point. Yeah, I was there for 3 years. So, so I wouldn't make a very good cult member because as soon as it starts, I'm like, hey, I know what this is because I've been through this before, right? So for the indoctrination, I mean, like I said, the key thing is to have your charismatic leader. None of this works if you don't have charismatic leadership. So people have to have like an extraordinary amount of faith in their leader. They have to really, believe that this person is going to do something great for them. And if they don't listen to them, they're screwed and whatever. I mean, in a cult, it's It's a spiritual thing. Obviously, it's a spiritual doctrine issue. But then to indoctrinate, this charismatic leader doesn't do all the work on them by themselves. They use peers to indoctrinate. So once people in the cult, and like in the UBF also, I mean, I feel kind of talking about the UBF like a cult. I mean, technically it is, right? But they weren't like a bad cult. I know that might sound weird, but it was more like a sect, I would say, although they're listed as a cult. But my experience with them was pretty good. That's actually where I got clean and sober. So, over 20 years ago when I got off the drugs there. So, I have a lot of love for the people that were there. I mean, for sure, they also had their leader and they had their unusual techniques, and they did have some of these criteria. There's no doubt about it. But it doesn't mean that they were, they weren't abusive. I mean, they were controlling though. But like I said, I wasn't a very good cult member, so I never experienced much of that. Because if they told me you can't do this or that, I'd be like, like, who are you, right? But my Bible teacher was a really nice person. She was extremely patient and non-judgmental. But they also had, these levels. So just to use them as an example, though, a new person who came into the UBF Bible study, they were called a sheep. If you were called a shepherd. And if you had come from another country and now you were doing Bible study here, teaching Bible study, you were called missionary. So they were like levels, because once you had Bible students, people addressed you as shepherd. So people naturally, they want to be included. They want to be in the good graces or whatever. It's a social standing. So you want that title of shepherd or shepherdess. Yeah, sheep. Literally. Well, it's the Bible, right? Sheep, shepherdess. And it was like a title of honor. I mean, it's not supposed to be, right? It's supposed to be all about humility, but I think, they know. So in the Sisto, that cult that I was in for the 3 years there, they had these levels: level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. And there was even a level 5 who was like overseeing level 4s. So you got your level, and then they say, who's your level 4? Or so-and-so is a level 4. So there's your status right there. And this use of terminology to reinforce that, like the title of shepherd or level 4. But I can think of a few things outside of those contexts where we have new vocabulary. Think a little bit. New vocabulary that designates your status in the cult outside of those places. And there's more than one level, right? You've got the one at the bottom that gets one title, and then you got the superlative one. Those are all the same techniques. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, let's see if I can pull this tab out, shrink it down a little bit. What? I got the wrong one. Sorry, bear with me 1 second, because I want to pull up this Twitter post here so we can just go through some of the details of it, because it's quite mind-blowing when you hear this. Okay, I can shrink it so I can see it. Nixium? No. I mean, those, that's another level. I mean, those are like sex cults and stuff like this. Okay, bye, Crazy Cuban. No, where I was, DeSisto, it was an experimental school, a residential school, year-round, which used all techniques of a cult. And so they had to brainwash the parents. And then I was also in the University Bible Fellowship, which, I mean, it's probably more like a sect, but apparently meets the criteria for a cult. But what I want to talk about was the things that they do to control you. Using peers, using language, groupthink, group punishment. Actually, let me just read you something here. Where is it? About groupthink. This was on Britannica. Mode of thinking in which individual members of a small cohesive group tend to accept a viewpoint or conclusion that represents a perceived group consensus whether or not the group members believe it to be valid, correct, or optimal. That's quite mind-blowing, because they're telling you that once there's a perceived consensus, the individual group members may still have doubts about whether it's valid, correct, or optimal, but they'll accept it and go along with it because they believe it's the group consensus. Interesting. What would happen if it turned out that actually the majority of the group members had their doubts about it and didn't believe it was valid, correct, or optimal? What if they started to speak out? Oh, the cults have different techniques to make sure that doesn't happen. So, you'll lose your status, you'll get punished, you'll lose your privileges if you start talking like that. Don't start talking trash. But a mode of thinking that the group accepts as a perceived group consensus, whether or not they believe it to be valid, correct, or optimal. I mean, really, that's just mind-blowing. So they're literally telling you that they'll agree that this is the way it's done, this is a consensus, even if they don't personally agree. Groupthink reduces the efficiency of collective problem solving within such groups. You can imagine that that if once they've adopted a mode of groupthink, and nobody in the group wants to admit that they have their doubts about it because they think that everybody else is thinking that, that it limits the efficiency of collective problem solving within such groups, of course, because now they have to stick to the narrative. So how are they going to problem solve? I mean, if you're trying to problem solve lots, you got to brainstorm. You got to think outside the box. So, hello, Maria. So if you're in a situation where you think that what the consensus is and you don't agree with it, but you're just going to keep going along with it because you don't want to upset the cult, you don't want to stand out, you don't want to be the black sheep, it reduces collective problem solving within such groups. I thought that was very interesting. I can even also see how this would apply on a larger level in society. If society accepts that a certain thing this is the way we do it. I mean, look, we can talk about historical examples, I don't know, pick a really bad one, like slavery, for example. A lot of people have their doubts, but kind of they think, well, this is the consensus, this is what we do. Let's just say you're a Roman citizen and you well, hey, this is what we do. We have slaves, and you don't want to upset the group with showing that you're not thinking like the rest of the group. I mean, this is just plain conformity. Then what happens? You stay in that. Man, my mother lived through World War II. And I know that her father did not agree with a lot of what was going on. Didn't want to say anything, though. Well, there are also consequences if you speak out. It does restrict any kind of progress or problem solving. That's for sure. So where's my other tab? Okay, a little bit about the abusive relationships. Okay, get ready. This is so mind-blowing. Tell me if it resonates with you. Some of these are the things that I already covered with the cults. Hold on one second. The vaping break. It's hard being a Pleiadian. Well, I can only imagine. I can imagine how hard it would be to get people to believe you too. I mean, I know there's people out there who say they're Pleiadians. All right. So you may be in an abusive relationship if they, and so this is from Kulvinder Kaur, MD on Twitter. If they stop you seeing friends and family. Okay, we talked about this in the cults, and you can also connect the dots to if this happens somewhere else in your life. Abusive relationships stop you seeing friends and family. It's abusive. I mean, not if you say, well, not this Friday because such and such, but if it is a chronic, ongoing, indefinitely ongoing thing, then that's abusive. That's not normal. Maybe you need a reality check. Well, I'm going to use the word boyfriend because I'm a female, but I'm not saying that only men do this, but I'm going to just say your boyfriend, okay? If your boyfriend chronically doesn't let you see friends and family, that's not normal. It's just not normal. And I know it's hard to accept that when you're in that kind of relationship, because that would mean you might have to turn your whole world upside down. Won't let you go out without permission. Hello, wake up call. Wake up call. Your boyfriend won't let you go out without permission, sometimes even not without supervision. Okay? And obviously, like, let's say you're in the middle of a war and there's a curfew. I mean, on a broader context, obviously, in the school like I was in a cult, won't let you go out without permission. Of course, we can go anywhere without permission. We can't even leave the dorm without permission. That can be revoked. It's a privilege. But in a larger context in society, if there's an emergency situation, like let's say it's a war, and they say, well, you can't go out. There's a curfew because you might get bombed. Well, I guess that's one thing. But if it becomes, you just don't know. You're in a relationship where you don't know, like you can't go out without permission. This could just happen anytime. Tell you what to wear. So, I mean, we kind of know that this is not normal in a relationship. I mean, your boyfriend might say, I really like that red dress. Would you wear that one for me? But this is telling you, like, you must wear this, or you may not wear that. I'm telling you. Sound familiar? Have you been in an abusive relationship? Have you had a boyfriend who tells you what to wear? I don't know. You might want to get some help with that. Monitor your phone or emails. Has your abusive boyfriend been putting you under surveillance? That's not normal. I mean, at least not at the time when Dr. Kulvinder Kaur wrote this thing. At some other time, a society will decide that it is normal for someone to monitor your phone or emails. Maybe even track you. Like, there's actually these tracking apps. Oh, hi, crying hippie. 90% of men? Oh, I don't think so. I think you've had bad luck. I mean, listen, my man doesn't do any of that. That's why I'm with him. He would never dare. Bless his heart. He's a good guy. That's Aaron. Monitor your phone or emails. There's a tracking app. They designed it to market it to parents, that the parents could put it on their kid's phone. And then they can track them and they know exactly where they are and all this all the time. But guess who got hold of this app? People who are abusive. I mean, it could be a cult. It could be, oh my gosh, it could be something even worse, like trafficking or whatever, if they even have phones. I don't know. But anybody who wants to control someone else and control their movements. And what was the other thing? Your abusive boyfriend, or, really could be anyone, right? Monitor your phone or emails. Control the finances or won't let you work. Won't let you work? That's a red flag. Control the finances. Interesting. Let me just take a sip of my coffee. By the way, I've got that keto elevator that I've been telling you about. It's good stuff. Tastes like creme brulee. I still have the link if you want a discount on it. I didn't have my act together, so I didn't put it below, but I'll have to put it. I should have done it, man. I'm terrible at that kind of thing. But it's good stuff. But I need a couple sips to get to fuel my brain. Interesting, Ruth. I don't know how they get your number. Who's been handing out your number? Control the finances. Interesting. I posted this little video recently about digital ID and programmable digital currency, where your employer or the government can decide what you can do with your money. So it's not being implemented yet. Oh, you got the keto elevate, and you did, Nick. Cool. It is good, isn't it? It's so tasty and it gives you a real boost. So, this programmable digital currency. So the article that I posted, this was like down the road. I mean, I wouldn't even use the word futuristic at this point anymore, because we're talking like in the next 5 years. Audio feed. Oh, the audio feed slowed. Oh, maybe that's on your end. Sorry. So, this is like coming up pretty soon. I mean, they're trying to work out the details of it already. They're at the point where they're saying, like, you're going to be able to buy one pair of shoes per year. Like, they're thinking about it. 1% of your food can be beef. 93% has to be vegetable. So they're working this out. And I was looking at this. Go see the video if you haven't seen it. And this was like in our mainstream news here. They're like, oh, hey guys, there was a study and they figured out that if you don't use anything, then you don't make any emissions. So we're not going to let you buy anything. Crazy, eh? Because first of all, they made all this junk that expires. So we have to keep buying more stuff. They tell us, oh, you make too many emissions because you buy too much stuff. Well, now you can't buy anything. Problem, reaction, solution. I mean, what a great setup. Because we were wondering, like, why does everything have to break? Why is everything such bad quality for like the last 30 years that you have to keep buying more garbage, more stuff? Problem, reaction, solution. So they were saying, well, the thing to do would be to program your digital wallet so you're only allowed to buy certain amounts of certain items. And I thought, man, that's like what a pimp does. And I kind of mentioned somebody tried to pimp me out once when I was young. I mean, you guys, like, I never mentioned this stuff. You guys, it's like you know me in a way because I've been on here forever. But I had this boyfriend. So I know something about abusive relationships. I had a boyfriend when I was very young. I mean, I met the guy when I was 13. So most of the time there, I was 14. I was with him. The guy was trying to turn me into a prostitute. I didn't even realize it. And then when he eventually told me, he's like, oh, you're going to go to the gym and we're going to get your hair done and you're going to be so beautiful. And he told me about his ex-girlfriend, Debbie, and he did it to her. He showed me a picture. And then I was like, well, what happened to Debbie? And he goes, oh, she turned into an alcoholic. Like, what a loser. After I was like, well, no wonder she turned into an alcoholic. I mean, look what he did to her. He put her out on the street. What do they call that? Turned her out, you know. Anyway, lucky for me, I didn't do it. But I was thinking, programmable digital currency is like a pimp. You make the money, and then your pimp says how much you can have back and what you can do with it. How crazy is that? So control the finance or it won't let you work. I mean, you know, we can go a little bit beyond just your run-of-the-mill cult and your abusive boyfriend. We can say, like, the level of control that is being taken here with our finances would have never been considered acceptable. Digital currency, I understand, like, digital money, like, it's the way of the future. What can you do? People are using it now with crypto. But why would somebody be able to control what you do with your money? That was not considered normal. It's not considered normal right now. They're already starting to push it on you. Next, control what you read, watch, and say. Absolutely. I was in DeSisto. Everything was controlled, and we really didn't have much access to anything. Also, what you say, too. There were some restrictions. In a religious cult, you know, they'll do that as well. In a relationship, I mean, if your boyfriend controls what you read, watch, and say, especially what you say, I think it's a red flag. You know, sometimes the government can do some of that kind of stuff too, though, right? I mean, right now, apparently there's another bill in the Canadian Parliament. They've been trying to restrict what we can do and say on social media. I mean, they might look at this video and go, that's a terrible video, terrible report. This person is not a journalist. What are they doing? Broadcasting themselves, saying things like this, making people question things. Well, but that's just called free speech, talking to your friends. I mean, on the one hand, they're telling us, you know, the future is doing things remotely and on Zoom. And I'm doing that right now. And I'm talking to you guys. Some of you guys in there are people that I know in person. And we're having a discussion here. I mean, I know I'm doing most of the talking, but you guys are also in the chat. So what's the problem, right? But they're trying to make it that you'd have to get some kind of license to be able to broadcast yourself. And recently they denied that license to Rebel News. But for now, the license would only be like to attend press conferences and stuff. That's Rebel News. They said only 1% of their content was considered actual news. So, I mean, I guess they decide the standard. What's next here? Monitor everything you do. Hi, Allison. Monitor everything you do. Who does that? Does your abusive boyfriend monitor everything you do? That's a red flag. Man, I know someone, I mean, like, I've known people where, you know, their boyfriend will listen into every single conversation they have on the phone, right? With the a cult, or like, for example, the experimental school that I was in, the cult school, they monitor what you do. They listen. I mean, obviously, they're following you around. Depending on how obedient you are and what a model cult citizen you are, you have more freedom, more privileges, right? But they pretty much monitor everything you do. And remember, they get the other members to monitor each other. They don't have to do all the work. Patty Hearst syndrome? I think that's like Stockholm syndrome, where people are abused and they sympathize with their abusers. And that happens, yeah. Yeah, I think at a certain point, people just completely lose track of like what's normal, what's not normal. And like I said, the goal here, and they even said this when I was at that school, they talk about these in these contexts of schools and therapies and thanks, Michael. You know, and cults, they talk about breaking you down to build you back up. A lot of the time people arrive in these places where they're already kind of broken down. So do they really need to be broken more? I don't think so. But they're telling you, we're going to dismantle you. That includes your uh, your own inner voice, your own boundaries, and we're going to build you back up. Well, what we're going to build is we're going to build a new version of you that is totally programmed to do what we tell you. You know, what's next? Punish you for breaking the rules, but the rules keep changing. Does that sound familiar? Have you been in a relationship where the rules keep changing? That is really a tough situation, because eventually you're like, well, I'm not going to do anything because everything's wrong. I have to walk on eggshells all the time, right? When I was in DeSisto, they did change the rules a lot. I mean, usually what they did was they added to them. They made them stricter and stricter and stricter, you know? Cults will do that. Like, I have this great book. It's called Heaven's Harlots. Man, what an excellent book. It's about a cult. It's about the Children of God cult. Hi, Joanna. So the Children of God, it started out as like a supposed Christian cult, and it was led by this guy who called himself Moses David, but his name was David Berg. And one really big feature with cults is extra biblical revelations, which the UBF didn't have. They just had unusual practices. You know, they did not have extra biblical revelations. Michael DeSisto, everything was extra biblical, obviously, even though he was some kind of a lapsed. He was very into New Age, and he would make us go to these like New Age seminars. He would make us do numerology and stuff. He would make us do it, like we had to. He had an astrologer on site, a psychic. I mean, look, some people have a gift, you know, it's possible, but it was definitely part of what he did, was a lot of this kind of stuff. But yeah, Children of God. So they start out like that, but eventually, you know, David letters became more important, even like and the mole basically decrees. I mean, they were, you know, encouraging people and giving them updates and stuff, and also decrees of like, this is what we're going to do next. And at a certain point, they took fishing, which we did at the UBF, where you'd go out and you try to recruit people for Bible study. They took it from fishing to flirty fishing, where they would use the women's charms to lure in men. Eventually, that went into full prostitution, and they justified it. They said, you know, heaven's harlots, you're selling your body to bring people to Jesus. I mean, so that, you know, you meet a new person, you know, thing going here where we have sex with people, so about the Bible. So, you know, if you start at zero, people are going to be like, what? That's insane. But obviously these people had been desensitized for a long time, until eventually they were like, yeah, that makes sense. So that's how this stuff works. It's layers and layers. The same with the abusive relationship. It doesn't go from 0 to 60. It's layered and layered and layered. And it doesn't get better. You stay in that relationship, they're just going to keep layering it. You stay in the cult, they're going to keep layering it, right? And you can think of other situations where it just keeps getting layered on. So punish you for breaking the rules. So I mean, when we were in the system, if you broke the rules, you could get confined. in our society, which we didn't have a short time ago, but we have down at Desisto. You could put the whole dorm in lockdown. We use the word isolation now. So I feel like now that you've been through some of that, you guys can relate a little bit to what I went through when I was there. So they could put, they could room you, or they could put you in isolation. We didn't use the word isolation, but we did use the word roomed or farmed. There's some invented terminology or new terminology, farmed. There's another thing I found out. Scientology, they do a lot of that. They have a ton of terms that they use that are just invented. So if you are involved in something and you notice there's a whole lot of like new invented lingo being thrown around, maybe it's a red flag. Let's see what else. Tell you it is for your own good and that they know better. Well, they're the experts. I mean, Michael Desisto is obviously the expert on straightening out unruly children. So it's for your own good. And so, if we complained, or if we complained to our parents, we were just told it's for your own good. There you go. That's the end of it. I mean, when I was at the UBF, that's why I say it was maybe more of a sect, even though they're listed as cult, but maybe it was just the group that I was involved with. It wasn't, it was mostly what would happen is you would not be regarded as well. But that's another thing is ostracizing you. So if you don't follow the way the cult thinks, like let's say you're in a cult and you're like me and you're a bad cult member, what happens? You just don't have a good standing. I mean, where I was I punished? I mean, they didn't marry me to anybody. I guess I was punished. I wanted to get married. I was ready for an arranged marriage. Because I have a different view on marriage. Like I think a marriage is above all, it's a partnership. So the romance part it's important and you have to be like attracted to the person, but it's not I'm not a very romantic person. So this whole thing of like, the whole like romance experience, whatever, it's not that important to me. I just need someone I can really connect with and just partner with, So I was very willing to get married off in an arranged marriage. But I guess I wasn't a very good cult member, and so they didn't marry me to anybody. I did smoke cigarettes at the time, and obviously that's no good. But nobody really would say anything super directly. Although, I've been in other churches too, where like I remember this one church where they wouldn't let me be an usher because I smoked, but they wouldn't say it directly. They handed me like a page of like all this criteria you needed to be an usher. I mean, come on, you just welcoming people or just shaking their hand to come into the church. It's not like you're applying for a professorship at a university. But they gave me this list and they're like, well, maybe you should just look at that list and see if there's anything on there that applies to you. And I was like, what? Just because I smoke cigarettes? But I've never been the kind of person who wants to hide things. So, I mean, I'm an Aspie, so I'm not a very manipulative person, right? So I would smoke my cigarettes and I'd be like, oh, well, if you don't like it or lump it, it's my business. It wasn't really a big deal. I mean, I seen you eating those donuts. Nobody said anything to you, so it's not like we don't have bad habits. But I realize some other people, they just hide their bad habits and then they get more status. Don't allow you to question it. So that was tell you it's for your own good and that they know better. And the next thing was don't allow you to question. I feel kind of bad because like I'm kind of tired at the end of the day and I sort of lost my train of thought about where I was going with the whole thing about control. Oh yes, the punishments, like you don't get to be an usher or you don't get to get married or whatever. Punishments for not following. They're not always really obvious. They're more just like a loss of status or a not gaining of new privileges. Don't allow you to question it. That's the next one. Obviously, don't question anything or you're a very bad cult member. Tell you you're crazy and no one agrees with you. So if you do say something, you're crazy. And like we're talking here about a bad relationship, right? An abusive relationship. And if you say, like what you're doing, it's not right. And they'll say, you're crazy. You're imagining it. That's gaslighting. Yeah, Charles, exactly. It's gaslighting. That's what your abusive partner will do. That is what the cult will do also. And remember, we were looking at this thing before. I'll just go back to it. Groupthink, where they say, I'm just going to read it again in case you didn't hear it. Mode of thinking in which individual members of small cohesive groups tend to accept a viewpoint or conclusion that represents a perceived group consensus. Perceived. Whether or not the members believe it to be valid, correct, or optimal. Hold on, I gotta pull up my other page here. So this business about gaslighting you. So it could actually be that there's other people that would agree with you. Hi, Bella. I'm glad you made it. So it could be that there's, oh, hi, La Rosa. It could be that there's other people that agree with you. Maybe actually the majority would agree with you. But when you're in a situation of groupthink, everybody just assumes what the consensus is in the cult. And so they don't want to speak up. Because if they do, and everyone else doesn't agree, it's just like in the abusive relationship, you'll be told that you're crazy and no one agrees with you. You know, I mean, they might not say straight up you're crazy. They might say like, you know, let me think, maybe you're sinning, or you're not, like you're not spiritually evolved. I don't know, you guys help me out. What kind of words they might use for that? Are you on a tape loop? No, it's because some people came in late. So I wanted to bring it up again in case, because we're like halfway or near the end, but in case somebody missed the beginning, because a lot of people did. So I wanted to mention that because it's really important. We got to remember what does groupthink do? And they said it hinders progress. You know, like you get stuck in a rut. Yeah. So tell you you're crazy, right? And no one agrees with you. Okay, next one. Call you names or shame you for being stupid or selfish. This is what your abusive relationship. This is what happens in your abusive relationship. Call you names or shame you for being stupid or selfish. I'm just going to let you sit with that one for a minute. I don't think I need to explain it. I'm sure that you would recognize it if you were in a relationship where someone was doing that to you. Gaslight you. Sorry, I can't see it for it's so small. Gaslight you, challenge your memory of events, make you doubt yourself. Wow. Absolutely. Make you doubt yourself. Challenge your memory of events and gaslight you. So yeah, they can easily say, well, that never happened, or it didn't happen the way you think it happened. But I'm thinking, I can't help notice that, I mean, if you guys remember even like you can get gaslit on a societal level too. Like even you all know there were things that you could easily pull up on Google. It was kind of like a giant library. A lot of things have just been memory hold. There's articles for events that happened or whatever. Things that were documented in the mainstream media. And some organizations, when they realize, oh, people saw this and they're catching on, they don't like what we're doing, they just memory hole it. But there's a way back machine, so you can go and check it out. I mean, I've seen quite a few of those things where, it doesn't exist anymore. But you can still pull it up, but you'd have to know what the URL was before. But making you think that things make you doubt yourself or doubt your memories. I'll see this kind of thing happening. They, again, like I said before, and I'm repeating because some people may have, I'm just looking at the comments. Some people may have come in late, so I don't want you to come in and be like, what in the world are you talking about? Cults, abusive relationships, and also like you can extrapolate. What about posting what is happening to you publicly on social media for all to see as a cry for help? Well, that's your business, I think. I'm not so concerned about what you do to yourself. I'm more concerned about, how you're being influenced to behave, the techniques that are used to basically lower people's boundaries. Because I went through it. I know I'm repeating myself, but in case you didn't hear before, I went through that for 3 whole years. So I have a very strong sense for when this is happening. So if I mean, I'm with someone, but like if I met someone as soon as they started this, and man, does it set me off. I have no tolerance for it. Even my friends, like if I'm with somebody and I feel like they're disrespecting me, like it just totally makes me like, it gives me a lot of anxiety. Like when I was younger, I would tolerate people like walking all over me and whatever. Now it's like, it gives me so much anxiety. If I feel like somebody doesn't respect me, you have to respect who I am, what I believe, how I think, and just let me be who I am. You know what I mean? Somebody starts to change me or try to manipulate me or not accept me how I am. It makes me very, very uncomfortable. Even just with people that I'm friends with. And I won't make a big deal out of it. I just won't see them anymore. Like I can put up with a lot of things, like people have bad moods or whatever, an off date. But when I feel like somebody's like disrespecting the YouTube, disrespecting me, who I am in my core, gaslighting me, I can't stand it. If you do your crazy stuff and then you try to make it out like it's me who's crazy, sorry, I'm just not going to spend my time with you. I just can't. Complaining about what you post about your own profile, complaining to you and others. I think people just don't understand that social media, like you're broadcasting it. I mean, would you be telling everybody in your building about this? Would you go in? Imagine I've seen people post some unbelievably stupid stuff. Imagine, would you put that on a little poster and put it in the laundry room, for all your neighbors to see? I mean, that's about equivalent. Although I think sometimes that we do want to reach out and we are isolated, and it seems like social media is the only place that we can do that. I mean, look, I'm talking to you guys right here. I'm telling you my story here. But it's not just really for me so much. It's for all of us to just discuss, I mean, if you're in an abusive relationship or you have been, or you've been in experience with a cult or something like that, maybe this is going to help give you a bit of support, My advice is to just try not to get into that in the first place. But also that once you're in there, you're being gaslit all the time. So the goal is to make you think that you're wrong. But because they've used all those techniques, what I talked about before, love bombing, creating dependence, isolation, indoctrination, using your peers, using new lingo, group punishments and rewards, groupthink, all that stuff. Okay, you've been subjected to all that. So it's going to bring down your sense of who you really are. And it's going to bring down your boundaries, And then if you try to say something, they try to tell you that you're crazy. So it's a bad situation. And you will doubt yourself. You'll be like, maybe I am wrong to be thinking like this, because you've been through all that stuff. So even if they didn't gaslight you, you'd be like, well, I don't know, maybe it's just me. Maybe if I changed, maybe I was better, maybe I did the right thing, then this wouldn't happen. So I have like one or two more things here. Dismiss your opinions. Oh, it's you. Hey. Oh, it's Aaron. Can you close the door for just 1 second? Because I was just doing a live stream and then I'm going to make you your dinner. Close the door because Gunner's on PlayStation. He's using bad language. Okay, wait. Sorry, guys. I have to close the door. I mean, I could do a stream sometime with Aaron, but I'm about to wrap this up. Hold on a second. You want to say hi? Hi. Okay. Oops. So there's like two more things here. I'll tell him you said hi, Karen. Karen, did you see my video where we went to get Aaron's new wheelchair? And he specifically mentioned you and Nick at the end there, right? He misses you guys. He says hi. Okay, so dismiss your opinions. That's another thing. Only the cult or the boyfriend's opinions are valid, and your opinions are not. They're just stupid. Dismiss your opinions, And the last thing here, this was more for like relationships, play the victim. If things go wrong, it's all your fault. I think that's a little bit going back to the whole group punishment thing. Like if you're in the cult and they implement group punishment. It is the same thing as like, things are going bad, it's because of what you did, and look at what happened to everybody now. You're all punished for it. So I'm going to leave the link for the Twitter. Look, I'll give it to you again if you want to see it. I think I pretty much covered all the stuff. I'm just looking at your comments a little bit here. So, I mean, obviously, living in a situation where you're being indoctrinated by a cult or you're in an abusive relationship is very demoralizing. Thanks, Karen. I mean, I've been super busy lately. You guys know I went with Aaron to get his chair. I've had a bunch of appointments. I went to see my mom yesterday also. And Gunnar actually even got suspended from school yesterday. He was suspended. He was home all day for roughhousing in school. Sorry, old pale face here. I love that gloss though. It's so good. You like my family outings? Cool. I'm glad you like them. I'll tell you guys, I've been at a bit of a low point. Like, in my channel, I used to do a lot more creative stuff, a lot more humor. And you might be wondering, like, how come I don't? It's really because of the climate and it's the environment. If you want to see some of my extremely raunchy humor, like I did post something on BitChute the other day. I mean, Anita has had to like go on hiatus because I cannot understand the guidelines. I just can't, like, it seems super arbitrary, like what they demonetize or they take down. So I'm just like, I don't know, I can't say anything. So that really cramps your style, especially it cramps your humor. And the way it is these days, like culturally, is become very stifling for comedians. Like yeah, anything you say could be potentially offensive. So they have these guidelines, where you're saying something about a protected group and it's considered hate speech and stuff, like, right? So but who's the protected group? I mean, uh is our drug addicts a protected group or soon to be? So like I can't make jokes about that anymore. Anita can't. I mean, I really don't know who are the protected groups. Seems like everyone's a protected group now, except like just your average person, right? Yeah, I missed it before times too. But you guys, it's not like I'm not who I was. I mean, it's still there. It's just this is just a. I even actually told YouTube that in their survey. I was like, man, it's super stifling. I'm afraid to crack a joke. I'm afraid to say anything because wow, it reminded you of something. But I do have BitChute, so Anita posted a video on there because, Anita, it's drug humor, obviously. I mean, it comes from my old experience, so I mean, I can't help it. That's just what came into my mind. Well, no, if I make Anita transgender, then I'd be like offending transgender people. Oh, right, she should no, but she can't because it's me. So then it definitely a no. I can't do that. I mean, Anita is sort of bisexual and asexual. YouTube can't say anything about that. She's had girlfriends and boyfriends. You know her. She looks kind of like a dude. But yeah, so I have a new rap video from Anita. It's called "I'm a Slag." I can't even say the second part of the thing. I swear. I just, then boop. Oh, AI. Go look it up. Go on my BitChute. You'll see. Karen, did you see her rap video? I'll wait to see what you say. I hope you like it. I'm sure you will. But yeah, it's been like it's been sort of soul crushing. So I've been very busy doing things, and oh yes, I was telling you, Gunnar got suspended also for rough housing. So like just life stuff, and then I want to come on here and talk to you guys and joke around, and I feel like I have to watch myself, and maybe it's also because I'm a difficult time already knowing what's appropriate. So if you put me in a situation where like the rules are constantly changing. Oh, we just talked about that. The rules are constantly changing and I never know if I'm doing something right or wrong. It's probably even harder for me, because some people seem to have a handle on it, but I can't figure it out. So it's just like mind blowing, for me, it's just crazy. Nicole Arbor accused of being offensive? No, I didn't hear about that one. What did she joke about? First they came for the so-and-sos, and then they came for the so-and-sos, and then they came for the comedians. I think they're coming for the comedians at this point. It's not, you're not allowed to be funny anymore, because most humor is offensive to someone in some way. And the humor that I have used was always in some way related to me and my experience. I never just pulled something out of nowhere. But of course, watching that, they don't know who I am, they don't know my experience. So my characters were always based in some way on me. But yeah, you're likely to offend someone. I heard this thing on the radio where they had a comedian on the radio, and I was like, how are they going to do that without being offensive? And the jokes were really horrible. And like, I give you an example before I go. One of the jokes, he's like, so when you're at Thanksgiving dinner and there's always those awkward conversations and those awkward questions, and your uncle asks you for the 35th year in a row, so when are you going back to college? And you ask him, so when are you getting your booster? That's the real question. It was like that. I was like, oh, the cringe, Yeah. So, I don't know. You got to really watch yourself. How long has Aaron been in a chair? Almost 40 years. Sitting beside me? Nah, he was always sitting in a chair, unless he was like on the bed. He's been in that chair for a long time. Sitting beside you when he was very small? What do you mean? What do you mean very small? Oh, you mean my son? Oh, you think Aaron is Gunner? Is that it? Gunner's my son. He's not in a wheelchair. Aaron is a full-grown man. He has been for many years. He hasn't been small recently, and he's been in a chair for like 40 years. Maybe that explains it. Anyway, guys, that's it. See what you think. It's nice to see you here. Right, that's what it was, AC artist. So thanks a lot for joining me. It's always nice to see you here. I'm going to wrap it up. I know you guys have a lot of like good questions. He had long hair. Yeah, I used to have long hair. Well, it's getting longer now. But I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to make some dinner for my guys, and I hope you guys are all doing well. Does Aaron like his new chair? Yes, totally. Getting the chair was quite exciting for us. We waited a long time. So thanks a lot, you guys. Have a good weekend. We'll afterwards put the link for the Keto Elevate, which I have in my coffee, MCT oil powder, which I find is very good quality, very effective. And you can get a big discount if you use my link, so it'll be below after. All right, guys, nice to see you, and I'll see you next time.